Hello. It's great to be back again. It's great to be here again to be talking about .NET. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from whichever part of the world you're joining this live stream from. It's amazing to be with a very good friend of mine, Someleze Diko. And interestingly, Someleze, we were both together for the last edition on containers, where we helped people to learn the amazing stuffs about containers. And it's great to be back here again with you all. We would love to know where you're joining this call from, so please include that in the section. I can see some persons already excited that we're getting started. Bradley Patterson. And hey, if you're currently here, tell us where you're joining from. How about to start with some intros, Simlizi?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. It's good to be back. Like Japhlet had said, my name is Someleze Diko, and I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft as part of the data advocacy team. So if you ever want to reach out to me or want to share your learnings or you want to learn from me and you want to see awesome content and awesome stuff similar to the one that we're sharing today, you can reach out to me on X at Dio Someleze and also on LinkedIn and just share what you're learning and share almost anything that you find very much useful in this space that we're in tech and what you're learning around .NET, Power Platform, Fabric, and all the works.
Great. And I'm Japhlet Nwamu. I am a .NET Cloud Advocate here at Microsoft. Love talking about .NET, love building solutions about .NET related to .NET and artificial intelligence, and also helping people to do amazing stuffs with Microsoft's technology. I can see Bradley is joining us from South Africa, so it seems like Someleze has a fan joining from his country. I hope more persons from the African continent and from anywhere around the world are able to join this live stream. You can always connect with me either on X at Japhlet Nwamu and on LinkedIn, Japhlet Nwamu. I think those handles are already available in the chat.
Oh, it seems like we lost Japhlet there for a second. But just like he said, you can also reach out to him on those handles on X, and also you can reach out to him on LinkedIn. Like he mentioned, make sure that you actually share on the comments section on where you're from, where you're joining from. I'm joining from Durban, South Africa, just like Japhlet said. There's someone from South Africa. I can see Bradley is on the comments. So hopefully Japhlet is going to be back um, quite quickly, probably, and then we can be able to kick off this live stream. Japhlet, do we have you?
Yes, you do. Apologies about that. And in this session, we're going to be talking about .NET Aspire, which is one of the cool technologies that Microsoft has as part of its .NET suite. It's pretty cool and amazing because Aspire does a lot of cool stuff for us. We'll be learning about all of them during the entire period of this session. So let's dive straight in. We would be
Yeah.
sharing with you the link, and I'll just stick that in the chat, Similizi.
Yeah, awesome. Just make sure that as we are going along with everything that we're doing today and you're very much interested in just trying it out yourself, make sure you go to the link that Japhlet is sharing on the chat and be able to just clone the repository to get today's workshop and get the code for today's workshop. I'm pretty much sure you're going to enjoy as much as we are going to enjoy showing it to you. You're going to enjoy building some stuff with you. And with that, Japhlet, let's talk about .NET. I know one of .NET's goal is to be a unified development platform that developers love and businesses trust because it enables developers to build any kind of applications with best-in-class runtime, programming languages, development tools, and a vast ecosystem that is powered by amazing developers around the world. Japhlet, I'm very much interested to actually know for you which part of .NET is actually your most favorite? Is it, are you on the mobile side of things, or are you on desktop, web application, or are you in cloud native?
Yeah, so I think this actually goes back to when I started off. I won't tell you all the entire story, but back in 2019, I always wanted to learn .NET. I was always in love with Microsoft technologies, and I wanted to build desktop solutions. So desktop has always been something I've been interested in learning how to do with .NET. But there's been a bit of a twist. There came artificial intelligence, and AI blew a lot of things. It changed a lot of things. It made a lot of changes. It was so amazing. And at this time, I love talking about AI in .NET and helping people to actually utilize some of the cool tools that are there. What about you, Someleze? I'd love to know which part of .NET you are most excited about.
For sure, for sure. I also have like a similar background to you, because in uni, I actually learned .NET and C Sharp, and we most of the time we actually did web development. So web development is, in a sense, one of my favorite parts about .NET. And I remember, I think quite recently or a few years back, when I tried to actually tap into the mobile side of .NET with .NET MAUI, and trying to build like a very simple mobile application for one of the workshops that we actually had within Microsoft. But with everything that's gearing towards AI, I'm also interested in how I can bring AI into some of the applications that I could build using .NET, whether it be a Blazor app, or maybe it may be a .NET MAUI application. And I'm pretty much certain that, Japhlet, you are much more leaning towards which one of the IDEs, whenever you're building your .NET application, like one of the tools, are you more of the .NET CLI type, or are you more on the VS Code type, in a lighter version, or are you in the actual IDE, Visual Studio? Which one is much more interested you?
Yeah, so I think over time, while learning .NET or using .NET, I have used a all of them, in fact, at some point. And Visual Studio would be the specific idea you'll be using for this entire presentation. But for anybody joining, be aware that you can use any of these. And hey, I forgot to mention, you can let us know which of these platforms you are very much interested in. Let us know which of the tools you love. Let us know which of the operating systems you love building for. And if you're very conversant with ecosystems, also be sure to let us know. But for me personally, I love Visual Studio because it comes with a lot of dependencies, and it gives us that ability to. It's heavy, but it comes with a lot of cool stuffs that we're going to see.
Yeah, awesome. And what I also love about .NET is that you can be able to build any type of application across web, mobile, desktop, as we just mentioning, cloud, and more, while infusing them with AI, like I mentioned earlier on, with everything leaning towards AI, and building them across any operating system. As you can see on the screen, you could build for a Windows operating system, Linux, Mac OS, and whilst also tapping into the ecosystem of getting those naked packages from Visual Studio as an IDE, like Japhlet had mentioned. And again, with a wide range of tools and a great command line. But Japhlet, when we're building applications with .NET, what kind of things do we really need whenever we're building those solutions using .NET? It could be a web app, it could be a mobile application.
Yeah. So for me personally, I think generally there are four key things. I was summarizing these four key things, as you can see on the screen, that applications generally need. They need to be observable, the feature of observability. That simply means they being alert to notice a lot of the things that could happen that could be wrong. There are issues, something is not working. But not just that, they should also be able to, at the same time, flag an error and let the software developer or whomever is using such tools to know there's a problem here, and you need to fix it. Right. That's one. Another one is we also understand the fact that things can't be 100%. things will not be 100%. Whether the tools you're using, whether it is, whatever you're using, it will never be 100% available. There would be times when it might just go off or it doesn't work and things like that. And so with resilience, we want people to, even though those type of situations occur, people should still have access to whatever they are building. So for example, my laptop goes off or my device goes off or shuts down while I am building a solution, I do not lose everything and I have to start all over from scratch. We need our softwares, whatever tools we're using, whatever applications we're building to be resilient. And also for the point of scalability, actually being able to use it across different platforms and make it really, really easy for people to go around this manageability, being able to, whenever you have issues, whenever you have difficulties with it, being able to actually manage every single problem, but most importantly, to be able to fix those problems. Those are what I think makes a great application, what I think every application should have. And I mean, these are key features, and we're going to see soon how .NET 8 and .NET Aspire helps to ensure that your application or whatever you're building has all of these features.
Yeah, and to add on top of what you are saying, Japhlet, most especially when it comes to scalability, applications have to be able to be scalable. So today, much of you could have an application that's serving about a few hundred people, but what happens, those are the questions that you need to ask yourself is what happens when it serves tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of users, right? Your app really needs to be scalable, and every app really needs that part of that. And finally, as a developer, like Japhlet had mentioned, you want to be able to easily manage your application and easily deploy it so that you can continuously and rapidly iterate on our apps. And I know Japhlet actually just mentioned .NET 8 and .NET Aspire, which we'll probably be getting that into that as we go along. But I want to look at, inside of .NET, and we get into like a little bit of a deep dive, as you have the ability to not only build these applications, but integrate into all of these different parts. And in .NET 8, the team can be able to add more goodness across all the different key areas for developers. And I wonder what this really means, Japhlet, with .NET 8 across the board around, observability, resiliency, scalability, and manageability with .NET 8.
Yeah, so I'm going to go over and explain some of the key features that are mentioned here. I'll pick a couple of them. First, I would like to talk about for observability, I would like to talk about redaction. Now, just to give some context into that, redaction is basically when you are able to be able to ensure that your solution is working properly. Observability, like I mentioned earlier, enables your solution to run through whatever tools you are using to actually run through your data, gather logs, and what we call telemetry data on how different things are working in your application. And then when it notices that something is not working, it creates a prompt or it alerts you. Now, redaction ensures that while it is doing this, while it is storing those logs, storing those telemetry data, when there are sensitive information, things like people's passwords, things like tokens, things like PII, it is secure. It is not included in that log information or that telemetry data. And this is done automatically utilized in .NET 8. .NET 8 actually introduces these login extensions that makes it possible for you to be able to do data reduction. You also have things like OpenTelemetry, which is a powerful observability framework, and it is included in .NET 8. OpenTelemetry is key, would be utilizing automatically a lot of these softwares be utilizing the open telemetries, APIs, while building your solutions. Now, that's for reduction. The next I would really talk about is on the scalability, on the resilience piece, and I'll talk about the signal arrow statements we connect, which maybe a lot of people might not be conversant with. So when we spoke about scalability, resilience, when we spoke about resilience, we said our solutions will not be 100% available because of issues that might arise. For example, it could be network issues, it could be your device crashing and you are losing storage or things like that. With Signal Arrow, which is embedded in .NET 8, it ensures that it preserves the connection state on the server side. So what happens is that the server would keep track of all the client states. It's going to keep track of the groups. It's going to keep track of the user IDs if you're using those and other relevant information. And then ensures that whenever you reconnect, you do not lose any of these information. What it will also try to do is it's going to ensure that it's able to reconnect as early as possible. It's to try to reconnect automatically, but in cases where it's not able to reconnect automatically, then it has to wait for the person to come back uh, online, or that specific issue is fixed. And then once the person comes back online, he or she has the ability to actually continue from where they stopped. So it's like you having something stopping what you're doing, but then coming back whenever you are able to, and it feels like you are not losing any much time. It just keeps going on and on and on. Right. Now, for scalability, I would like to talk about the AOT. And for those who are not aware, AOT means the ahead of time. And in .NET 8, what it basically does is it would compile all of your solution into a native machine code ahead of time. The ahead of time compilation ensures that you do not ensures that your solution lasts, and that the libraries that are needed to be marked as AOT compatible would work seamlessly with the native AOT, ensuring that your solution, because you're using this framework, this specific tool, it's ensuring that you are able to deploy your solutions and at the same time it works across board. This is ideal for cloud infrastructures and hyperscale services that we might be building. Now, the next one I'll be talking about is the Chiso Ubuntu, which is a container. And what this does is ensuring that, for example, the size of your documents that you impute into your software or into your containers are in the right format. So it will strip away unnecessary components from the container image. It would also ensure that various operating system packages and libraries are retained. And then it also provides a rich to learn experience that makes it really, really easy for you to scale your solution, to be able to bring this solution to lots of people who need to access it. For manageability, the certificate auto rotation in Kestrel ensures that when your certificates are renewed, and certificates like a security measure, you have your SSL like your TLS certificate. So ensuring that that doesn't just require you doing it manually, but whenever it is updated, whenever it is renewed, it automatically does so for you. So instead of you going back and then updating it and putting all of the details, it just automatically does it for you. So with all of these different things that .NET 8 brings on board, it ensures that your solution, your application actually runs properly, and that you really don't have to do so much. It does a lot of these things for you.
That's really interesting, Japhlet. And I love the mere fact that you were able to clarify what AOT really meant, because for a lot of anime fans, they would understand that when you say AOT, you may be thinking about, an anime called Attack on Titan. This is totally different. This is around your .NET application and how you can be able to scale it a bit better. And I guess, Japhlet, from what you are just giving out right now, is that it means that at your fingertips, you can be able to easily integrate different Nugget packages to your application, for an example, and services from the frameworks into your applications to make them more observable, reliant, or resilient, scalable, and manageable in the long run. And I mean, that's a very decent benefit that comes with .NET 8. And I love that about .NET 8. But I guess you and I can be able to agree to this. It's still not easy to build applications as much as .NET 8 provides these different kinds of benefits and includes them into your long-term building of your application or development of your application, you know that as much as, even though a lot of this is included directly into the SDK and additional packages, it doesn't mean it's necessarily easy, because applications, as we build them out, they get more complex as they go. So what this means is that as developers, we have a lot of choices to pick. We don't necessarily have the best knowledge of where exactly to get started because of the choice options. And as a .NET developer, it wouldn't just be great. For an example, if you think about it, wouldn't it just be great if we had a paved path or a recommended path to do this with our applications, and how we can be able to easily build the solutions without having to think about the choices that we have to make, as much as there's a lot of them to make, and how things can get easily complex with the applications that we're building, and not having to worry too much about those things. And I know Japhlet actually has an answer to that, and that's the reason why we are here today.
Yeah, I really wish at this point we could have drum rolls and then we come over to the next slide, but we don't have that. Anyways, here we'll bring to you .NET Aspire. And .NET Aspire is one of the new tools that has actually been released. It is cloud ready, and it enables you to actually build observable, production ready, distributed applications that, as you build them out, and they are easy as you go. They help you as a developer to be more productive whenever you are developing these applications or you are deploying them. But hey, let's talk a little bit about .NET Aspire. What does this actually mean? We've spoken a little bit about some fancy words. You might be thinking, should I jump on .NET Aspire? Is this something that I should be using? Is this good for me? Like Someleze said, you have lots of great choices. So is this something that's actually good for me that I should be utilizing? Do I have to convert my application? Should every application use this? Well, the truth is .NET Aspire is for everyone and for every application, regardless of the size, regardless if it's big, regardless if it's small. And so the answer to this question would be a capital yes. And we're going to explain this in just a few slides choice for you. Well, let's think a little bit about this scenario. And we have this store. It's really, really cool store. This website it's a sports website, and probably for most of us, we might have built this kind of websites. What this actually would enable us to do is we'll be able to search for things online. Now, how do we build this application? How do we ensure that we're bringing this to life? At times, you might have a small team, and at times you might have a very large team that needs to build it. Sometimes it could be as small as you having your data source and then your application which is being built, as we're going to see next. And it's just going as simple as this, right? It's just something very, very easy, a very, very simple application. But in some cases, in the next slide, we're going to see that it will just be something as, yes, this is what I was talking about, something as you connecting to a data source, and then, you know, you just have to pull up or work on a Blazor web app, include your data. It could be hard coded, or probably you have it in your JSON file. Whichever ways, it's just ensuring that you have something where it's stored somewhere very small. Could also be maybe an SQL database where you have your data stored. .NET Aspire can help you in this case. Or maybe you're building something that is, let's say, for example, you have a, probably I'll call this a medium-sized application, or something that's more advanced, that simple. First example spoke about your application now includes, it's growing and includes lots of things. You now need to build a back end, and then you need to also build your front end. The back end will be able to talk to the database and connect to multiple APIs. This is also something that .NET Aspire can help you out with, and you can take advantage of .NET Aspire. As we're going to see in the next slide, it might be something as, it's as a little bit more complex than this, and with .NET Aspire you can still utilize this. But in some cases, in the next slide, we're going to see it might have grown so large and now very, very huge, contains so many different services that are connected to each other. It's now a fully distributed cloud native architected project. You now have lots of different dependencies. Whichever it is, .NET Aspire can help you, because .NET Aspire is meant for all scales of application, and as it goes, you can grow with your application.
That's interesting, Japhlet, because from what I could see, for an example, on the current slide that we're on, is that .NET Aspire starts to shine as, like you said, the application grows. And when we look at the common scenarios for developers that are building a solution or an application, is that they would start out building out the back end for their front end side by side. So you're doing this, simultaneously. Then the back end, like you said, usually talks to a database and has multiple APIs that the web app can be able to talk to. And there are several features of .NET Aspire, I think, that this type of application can be able to take advantage of. And I think Japhlet will actually get into how it actually gets much more complex and how you can be able to use .NET Aspire to be able to, navigate some of the challenges that may arise with you building your application like that.
Yep. So as was spoken earlier, some of these challenges are actually what we brought into those four sections: observability, resilience, it's ensuring that your entire solution is scalable, and finally that you're able to manage it. And even though it's as complex as this, as you can see, containing different sections, different APIs, you can still ensure that you have these four key parts working, and ensuring that your application is working properly. You can also, with .NET, be able to utilize it, even as you mentioned, you have a small application, or your application is growing, or it has grown to something as huge as this, you are also able to utilize it. Now, for .NET Aspire, it comes with a lot of things that we're going to talk about, a lot of different features that we're going to head over and talk about next. And these features actually make it very, very easy for developers like you to be more productive and to do lots of cool stuff. So, Melissa, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so with .NET Aspire, for an example, inside of .NET Aspire, you'll find smart defaults, developer dashboard, orchestration, service discovery, components, deployment. But what does it necessarily mean? And just like Japhlet had actually mentioned, is that this series of features actually help you as a developer to be much more productive, build better observable production ready distributed applications, and they ease the deployment in many scenarios for a lot of us as developers. We're going to take a look at a single one of these different features from start to finish and integrate them into an application that actually Japhlet has actually prepared for us. So now a lot of people, they would start with the developer dashboard because it's the fancy shiny thing that ships directly with .NET Aspire. But what we're going to do today is to start in a different area first, which I think is one of the areas and features that every single application should integrate into our application today. But before we can do that, I think Japhlet has like a small demo to just walk through the GitHub repository, to look at the project that we're going to be using, and we'll be, in a sense, aspirify today. That's a new word for you to actually learn as a developer. Aspirify your application with .NET Aspire. So this application is a weather hub that uses the United States National Weather Service API with a nice Blazor user interface that allows you to select a weather station. So the first thing that we're going to have to do with the demo is that we have to clone the repository where we'll find the source code for the application. I believe that the link is on the screen and it's also been shared um, onto the comment section. So Japhlet, if you are ready and you can be able to take us through the GitHub repository. You're on mute, Japhlet. Wonders of technology.
Okay, sorry. I didn't realize that. So you should be able to see the GitHub repository, and I'm sure everybody should have access to the GitHub repository. You should be able to, I think, if you're able to go with us, that would be amazing. The GitHub repository actually contains a lot of cool files that would walk you through right from start up until how you are able to access all of these different features. So when you come over to start, you can see all of the different things that are embedded in this within this application. And we're going to talk about all of these different things and explain them to you all as much as possible. So first things first, what we're going to do is clone this and actually get it on our Visual Studio. So I'm going to clone this code. And then what I'm going to do is start off my Visual Studio. And when I start up my Visual Studio, I am going to let me know when you can see. I am going to come over here and just clone the repository. I'm going to input this link here. And just because I have done it a couple of times before, I would just include a name, something that makes it this different actually. So I'm going to head over and clone this. And I'm just going to hide this and wait for our Visual Studio to actually come back. So while we're waiting for this to come back up, when you head over to the GitHub repository, you should be able to see workshops, and under workshops, you'll be able to every single thing that we'll be doing throughout this entire period. Remember that, as we stated earlier, you can either utilize any of the IDEs that you are comfortable with, either Visual Studio Code, or if you're conversant or comfortable using your command prompt or your CLI, please go over and utilize it. And don't forget that you can utilize them either on Mac, Linux, or Windows at any point in time. So one of the things we'll be needing to be able to work around this is the .NET 8 SDK. We'd also need to beforehand install the .NET Aspire workload, and you would also be needing somewhere where you can create container images, either your Docker desktop or Podman, and definitely your IDE, which could be Visual Studio, could be Visual Studio Code, which has different dev kits, the C# dev kits, and all the dependencies that we'll be needing. Now, once we have opened up cloned our repository, we should see something like this. And here we can open up the start folder. Just a little bit about this specific solution we're working on. It's a weather application, and it's connecting and it's utilizing an API to connect to a weather website. So it's the United States government weather reporting website. And if we come over here, open up my weather, the data, and when you come over to nwsmanager.cs, just to show you the link. So this should open up. And this is where the API we're connecting to, api.weather.gov/zones, type, forecast, things like that. I'm going to be showing you, walking through what this actually looks like. So let me open up program.cs, and here you can find the entire code for this specific weather application. So let's run this, and it should start things up for us. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that if you're doing this for the first time, it would ask you if you need to activate your securities, your HTTPS, your certificates. It's going to, once you click on yes, to activate your certificate, and then you can go on to actually begin utilizing your solution. So we're going to wait for this to build and then see what our application actually looks like.
Yeah, and while we wait, just make sure that if you want to go through a similar step, the link to that specific GitHub repository is on your screen, so you can be able to try it out yourself and be able to follow along with the setups that Japhlet is actually taking us through, so that we can be able to aspirify our solutions. That's my favorite word for today, probably for the rest of the year. You never know.
Great. So we're back here, and you should be able to see what our application actually looks like. You can see our weather hub, and here you can see the different states in the United States. This is again the United States National Weather Service. So for those of us in Africa, if you're conversant with a couple of the states in the United States, you can go on to actually check them out and see which of them, you know, which of these sites actually, which of the states you're actually conversant with, and then get over to check them out. Now, for example, I am going to go over to Washington. So let me come over here, and I've heard a lot about DC, right? So District of Columbia. And here you notice what you're going to see is getting data from the API. Now, usually if you need to build something like this, let's say for example, you're using your console application, you have to do something like actually just imputing results. And a couple of times you're not able to accurately get data from that API. For example, there are times where you probably just impute all of those details, but still it doesn't give you the right results, right? And that's something that is really a challenge. But here, you're able to utilize the API properly and connect to this website, get all of the data that you need while explaining the different meaning of the things, like being explicit. For example, for the rest of today in the District of Columbia, it's saying it's going to be mostly sunny, highs in
Sorry,
the lower
Japhlet.
90s. Yeah.
Uh, can you switch over to the browser quickly? We're seeing the IDE.
Okay. Currently at the browser. Oops. I think, did I share the wrong screen? So let me just reshare. I think I shared my entire screen. So you were not able to see what I was searching out as well.
We didn't see the browser, but we still see Visual Studio.
Okay. So let's see what the problem is. So I'm sharing my entire screen. Okay, so let's do this. Let me try sharing the browser itself. And yep, you should be able to see this now, right?
Yeah, we see it. We have your browser on
Okay,
screen.
okay, good. So let me just start this all over again. And this is what I'm trying to show you. This is the weather report. So this is what will come up when you start your application. When you run your application, you have it's connected to, like I mentioned earlier, the United States National Weather Service reports, and it has a list of all these states and um, cities in the United States. And then you can at any point in time go through each of these. There are lots of states. You can just come over and search for either the state or the name. I don't know if we know a couple of states in the United States, but let's see if I am able to find something. So I was actually going for Washington, and here I think I'm able to find Washington. And what I was explaining earlier is usually when you need to build something like this, you connect into your API, a lot of times it doesn't give you the definite, especially when you're building a console application, it doesn't give you explicit data. Sometimes it could give you wrong information. For example, it could confuse your Fahrenheit with your degrees, and some persons really get confused at that point. But what is happening here is it's actually explaining everything for you. So it's saying for Washington that it's going to, for the rest of today, it's going to be mostly cloudy in the late morning and early afternoon, then becoming mostly sunny. 20% change of light showers and thunderstorms late in the afternoon, highs in the upper 70s, east winds 5 to 10 mph, right? And then it goes on to get in real time all of the data from that link for us up until Saturday night. So this is what your application should look like when you run it for the first time, right? At first glance, this is what it should look like. Now, like Sumilizi had mentioned, we're going to be including a lot of different things, doing more of a lot of icing on the cake and seeing how these different features are actually going to work. So the first is actually smart defaults.
Yeah,
And
I actually
yeah,
have a
Sumilizi.
question about that,
Okay,
Japhlet.
please go on.
What with .NET Aspire, what exactly are smart defaults? Like, could you, like, for an example, with this application that we just looked at, I know it was just to give us like a tour, but in essence, when we're doing development for all of the apps that we're building, either it's a personal or a professional project, when we bring in .NET Aspire, what would be the role of smart defaults? What would smart defaults with .NET Aspire bring in into that specific application that we're building?
Great. So first of all, think of smart defaults as default tools or default settings that come with .NET Aspire. So when you're using .NET Aspire, it comes with it. Now, what are some of the things that come with it? For example, we spoke about observability, we spoke about resilience, and we said these things are actually key, right? Don't forget, going over again, we said observability, your specific application should be able to see through what's going on and say, hey, these are the you should be able to either yourself or it's automated. You should be able to see whatever is going wrong, whatever is going well, and things like that. And we said resilience, you are able to see what is going on. Um, but not just being able to see what's going on, even if you lose a couple of things, you lose your device or you lose internet connection, you're still able to come back. And then you should be able to actually check how healthy your entire application is. And that's what service default does automatically. So the moment you utilize service default within .NET Aspire, it's going to automatically do that for you. So let's head over to Visual Studio, and what we're going to do is in Visual Studio, we would be able to actually utilize create this and then see how it goes. So our application is still running, and I think at this time we should be able to see my Visual Studio screen. Please confirm.
Yeah, it's on screen.
Okay, good. So I'll just stop this. Great. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new project. So we'll come over here to our solution and we're going to add a new project to our solution. Come over here, add new project. And again, these are the templates that you can find, but we're going to search for Aspire related templates. And specifically, we'll be searching for .NET Aspire service defaults. Click on next. I am going to call this service default 1. I don't think I need to change that. And then I would click on next again. And notice it is utilizing .NET 8.0 as the framework, but also take note that it's giving it long-term support, supporting you as you go along the way. And we're going to create this and give it some time. If you're using Visual Studio Code, you can just go over to the search bar and should be able to find that specific template. If you're using your command line, you should also find the specific line of code that you're going to impute there, and it's going to get this out for you. Now, here we are. We have our service defaults project that has been created for us. So when you open up this, so one one thing I just noticed, we are actually using the My Weather Hub application without the API, right? So that's one challenge here. So what we're going to do is go back and utilize the specific one that has the API in it, right? So that was, let's go back here. You can always go back using that specific icon I clicked, and we would find start with API solution. right? We have the start, which doesn't come with our API. We had the second, which is start with API, and then we have the last, which is already completed and includes all of the different things that we would be adding. So let's go over this again and just utilize our start with API. It's still the same. If you notice with our start with API solution, we have the API and then we have the My Weather app. So let's do this again. And we're going to add a new project. We already created it here. So let's just go over next. I think service default one should also work. Again, I already explained .NET 8 long-term support. Go on to create code, and then we have been able to do this, right? So what we are going to do next is we would be able to add a reference, but what we can do is just drag and bring here. You're not moving it, it's just adding it as a reference. So drag and bring it here. Or you can also come over here and add this specific project as a reference. Now, if you notice, because we had already dragged and dropped, you would notice that here in the project, API and My Weather Hub are already clicked, right? Again, please, if you have questions from this, don't forget to include them in the chat section, and over time we'll be going over the chat just to ensure that we're carrying you all along and taking a look at your, responding to your questions, taking a look at them. So now we have added this, we've referenced them. Let's go over to the API project and open up
One thing,
project. Yeah.
for me to get, are you showing your entire window on the screen so that we make sure that there aren't any details that are missing?
Okay, so at this time I'm showing my Visual Studio screen alone because I am only carrying out the details on or the specific stuffs on Visual Studio. But when I need to, I think I shared my screen, my entire screen the other time, and then it didn't work. So hopefully this is working now and you're not missing anything. I think it might be a little bit better to keep it this way.
I think it would be best if you shed the entire
Okay,
desktop. Yeah.
okay, so let me do that again. So just 1 minute, everybody, and let me stop sharing and share my entire screen. And I think this should be working fine now. So let's see. This works, right? You're able to see my entire screen, right?
Yeah, we can see your entire screen.
Okay, good. And just for those in the audience, let's make this a little bit bigger so you all will be able to see it, right? So I think this works fine. So we've added service defaults and we have also been able to successfully reference service defaults. Now, the next thing I said we're going to do is come over to the API project, programs.cs, and here we would come over to the variable builder web application, and we're going to add a line of code. This line of code is also accessible in the D3. It's called add service defaults. Remember, adding it's a prompt that enables us to add oops service defaults to this. And don't forget what service defaults are. All of those those functionalities that actually ensures that our entire application is resilient. So I'll just copy this because we're also going to do the same for the My Weather Hub. This app service default ensures that a solution is resilient, ensures that it includes the observability features, and that we can also carry on those health checks that are very, very much relevant for us, right? And then what we're going to do next is head over to this section and impute our next line of code, which is the app map your default endpoints. And let's just confirm we're not having any errors. So app service default spelled properly. Sorry, add service default. Yes, I had to go through it again. And map default endpoints. So we're going to save this and I'll copy this code and then head over to my weather hub. And we're going to also go over to the program.cs and do the same. Great. So program.cs, come over here, and I should be able to see my already copied code. So I'll come here and paste that in, and then head over here, see my copied code, and paste that in. So let's ensure that all of the details are properly spelt. There are no typo errors. This is add. And then for the variable app equals to builder, we're doing the app dot map default endpoints. Cool. So let's save this. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to run both of these projects together instead of running it alone, instead of running it, bit by bit. And if you come over here, you would be able to see that you only have the opportunity to actually run and debug these projects one after the other, but we want to do it together. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate the what's called the multiple project launch configuration, and you should be able to do that either in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. So come over, right click, and I should find properties. And whenever come over to properties under startup projects, I would see the different application, the different both of those projects. So I can see the API and I can see my weather hub, and I am going to do multiple startup projects. And what's going to happen is when I click debug, it's going to start both of them, right? So I'll click on OK. And then just as a final check, let's see, we have everything properly done. Great. So now we have the notice that's changed now to the startup project icon. And let's see, this should work. We're going to wait a few moments for it to debug and run. And just in case it doesn't, we'll go back and review to see if we have any errors or bugs that would have given us that error. So notice it's saying there are build errors. Would you like to run? So let's see what the actual problem is. Maybe we are unable to find the oops, sorry. So let's come over here and let's see our programs. Let's see where the problem might be. So here in our programs, variable, and let's go over to the by weather hub and see if we probably have any issues with that. So we should have a launch.json file. Let's see where our launch.json file is. Under properties. Let's try running this again. Everything looks good. Hmm.
I think Japhlet, it's not picking up the map defaults endpoints, which is what's giving you an error there.
So let's try this again. Um, and let's add this. Let's try starting without debugging, and let's see if it's. So still have a few errors. So let's go over to this, and let's go over to our earlier solution. And let's just have the complete solution by the side. So
I think, Japhlet, what we can do is to just go over some of the setups that people can be able to do when they're setting up for the different features with service defaults, because it seems like the demo guards are not necessarily too friendly today. So we're just going to switch over to the slides on the screen, and then we can
yeah,
be able to look at like the
so
first service defaults and just give a few setup suggestions here and there.
yeah, so probably we'll go on and then we'll come back to that. Um, let's see one more time if okay, cool. So let's go over to the slides and then we can come back. We'll come back to the demo just to continue. But then if you've done it properly, you should see that some features would be those features are not visible to you because you know they are just those default dependencies, things that are included behind the scene to ensure that your entire application is running properly. Now, that's something cool actually with service defaults. For the next, we're going to talk a little bit about these different sections, the different files that are actually, or the different things are actually imputed within the observability within your code, your data aspire service defaults that actually makes your solution observable, right? Notice here that you have the add open telemetry functionality that has been embedded into it, right? That is an open source standard, and it's all of a sudden, becoming the normal way people actually are able to get deep metrics and able to trace the things that are going on within the applications, get insights from the things that are going on within the application. With ASP.NET Core, OpenTelemetry is actually deeply integrated into the built-in login service and metrics and tracing services that are provided. But with the data layer, with the service, all of these lines of code that are here into just a few lines that will be automatically configured and enable us to actually set up exporters so that we can publish our data even when we have them in other places, right? The next, and I'll pass it over to Someleze to talk about what else observability, the observability feature would be able to enable us to.
Yeah, of course. So these exporters directly enable you to export them to several services out of the box, and they will configure the gRPC exporter, which is what the dashboard will use later. Remember, part of the .NET Aspire, you have the service defaults, but you also have the dashboarding, which is something that we said you would look at it a bit later and start with the service defaults. So here, the gRPC exporter is what the dashboard will actually use a bit later to visualize, and which we'll talk about and see in a little bit a bit later. So you can also configure it to use command line or other services such as Azure Monitor to see your telemetry in production. What's great about this is that with just a few lines of code from this defaults, you will automatically be ready to go with some of the best metrics and telemetry in just a few seconds here. With just you being able to set this up properly, and hopefully the demo gods are actually with you at that point. But observability is not the only service default feature that is there. You also have resiliency, where when we think about applications and having spotty internet connections, we want our applications to be able to automatically retry. So, for an example, or be able to pick up lost connections. I think Japhlet had made an example earlier on where someone's sending out a request and then, they lose internet connectivity, and you want your application to be able to pick up where that request was dropped. And with standard resiliency turn out by default, your applications will be able to do just that and be able to pick up that specific request and the requests that are made to our application much more faster. So now, of course, these are the recommended defaults, but you can always tweak them to your exact needs. And this is how you actually add them onto your application. And I'm pretty sure through some of the demos that we actually have for today, you'll be able to see that in action. One last important part of the service defaults is actually health checks, in which Japhlet will actually talk about a little bit.
Yeah. So once that is activated, once service defaults are activated, it's able to successfully run health checks. And these health checks actually, with just a few lines of code, it actually makes it very, very possible for service defaults to automatically configure your application with several health checks. And these health checks can actually actually be extended to your specific health checks, and additionally a few endpoints that you can set up for automation to just make sure that your entire application are running in production. Now, something to note is that this specific service default will extended in future, as we look to integrate additional features into our application. But for now, these are our sets of defaults, and they can be utilized for the base application. They would enable further integration, as we start to see how it goes, I'll start to build out and I'll start to integrate our .NET Aspire and components into our application later. We'll see how all of these works, right? So maybe we'll pause at this point to see if there are any questions regarding smart defaults. And I don't know if there are any questions in the chat.
I think we can come back to the questions a bit later. I want to move on to actually seeing the smart defaults working, in action. And I think I have the right person to actually do a quick demo before we get to the questions for us with a smart default. And drum roll, please, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I want to introduce Bruno onto the stage to actually give us a demo around .NET Aspire Smart Defaults.
Yeah, sure. Hey, hello everyone. Super happy to help. My name is Bruno. I'm also a colleague of Japhlet. I work in I am a .NET advocate. And hey, I love the idea of using Aspire because it's really helped with a lot of things. So what you can see here right now, this is the same solution that Japhlet has open. And what I did here, I literally followed Japhlet steps and I added the service defaults project to the solution. Then I add a reference to each one of the projects here for the service default. So the API and the weather have reference to the service default. There it is. And later, what we have here is, as we see before, is we are going to add some lines around, hey, service default, add everything that we need right now to be part of the API, which is the backend and the front end. And when we run this, what we are going to have, and bear with me because it's going to be kind of tricky to show, we are going to have the front end here. This is the super amazing application. And we are going to have also running at the same time our Swagger backend. And if I go here to my consoles, I have the console for the backends and the console from the front end. So, hey, it's a mess, but later we are going to use Aspire to make everything easier. And one of the things that we added in this demo is that every 5 requests that we perform to the backend is going to trigger an error. We are not going to see the error here. If we start to get the information for the Skagway, and by the way, so sorry for my pronunciation. I am the worst. My accent is very bad, and these names are very hard for me. So I'm going to make a couple of requests. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't know, a couple of sample requests. I go back here, and if I start to see here in the logs, I have some errors here. I have an error here. And hey, we didn't even touch our code of our application to do this telemetry, submissions, and more. We just add the service default, which is an amazing piece of code that is going to add telemetry, resilience, and more. In the front end, we can see Poly trying to do trying to get some pulls and to try to see if the application is live. We have a lot of value just adding service default and implementing the service default reference in our project. So super quick view of how this works. And hey, back to you, Japhlet and Somi.
Thank you so much, Bruno. So, like Japhlet said, you saw that super quick demo from Bruno, and it was amazing. So, if you have any questions, be sure to put them in the comment section. I don't know if Japhlet, you've noticed during this super short demo that Bruno just did for us, if there are any questions around smart defaults with .NET Aspire that you notice in the chat. If Japhlet, you're saying something, you're probably on mute. You are still on mute. I can't hear you. You are saying something, but I can't hear you.
Okay, how about now? Okay, good. So next, let's move over to developer dashboards. And this was another great part that we wanted to showcase to you. Now, a lot of times with developer dashboards in Aspire, and we're going to see it for a lot of these things, that these errors that are being flagged, you should also want to be able to see, the logs. You want to be able to see the different things that are going on. Developer dashboard enables you to do this, and it's actually cool. Hopefully this feature is going to work for us. We're going to try that out, but first let's see just this little preview of what the dashboard looks like. So if you notice on the right side of the screen, you'll be able to see what the dashboard looks like, and here in the dashboard you'll be able to see structured logs, different metrics. You'll be able to trace your errors, the different things that are going on, and you'll be able to see the dependencies. So what I'm going to do now is reshare my screen, bring this back up, and we should be able to see this coming to life. Let me know when you are able to see my screen. Someleze.
Just waiting for it to come out on my end, and then we can add it to the stream.
Okay, so let's do this again.
Whilst you're sharing your screen, and obviously with the developer dashboard, it comes in the developer dashboard for .NET Aspire, which gives you a one-stop shop for an entire overview of your application, including seeing all of your projects and dependencies running, and giving you a deep visualization of your open telemetry data, all coming in via the gRPC exporter. So I'm just gonna double check if Japhlet's screen is on my stream, and then I
Yeah,
can be able to
so just to mention, let's probably talk a little bit about developer dashboards, and actually go through some sections of the slide. My screen is currently back up, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that we're going to see as we're going on. So first, you can do these in easier ways prior to now, or whenever you need to, if you're conversant with writing code or using your CL, you can decide to use this feature, running up your Docker, and then using the container image that's actually in the link mcr.microsoft.com/.net, and then you can just spin that up and you have Aspire dashboard. But with .NET Aspire, either on Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, it comes all of these comes along with it, and you are able to see a lot of the cool stuffs that are going to be going on. But for developer dashboards in .NET Aspire to actually work, there's something called orchestration, and orchestration is one of the key features of .NET Aspire. Now, let's briefly talk a little bit about what orchestration does and how it works. So, if you notice, while I was trying to activate service default and run multiple projects, what I did was go over to properties, and as you can see on the right side of my screen, that was exactly what we could see. I had to go over and start the different projects, just click on them and start them at the same time. With orchestration, is actually possible for you to do these things together, and there is in .NET Aspire the ability for you to do it. All you need to do is add a new project to your application, and we're going to use this code to actually add these projects. We're going to call this project, this new project, we're going to call it app host. And what this basically is going to do for us is enabling us to be able to add our project dependencies and orchestrate them as a single file, right? These dependencies, as you can see, to this case, we have the API service, and then we also have the front end. So we're connecting these two together instead of going to start visually. You click them, we're able to build them at the same time. So as we're going to see that both projects are spinned up, are run, are built, and we're going to have the final result, which is our developer dashboard. And in our developer dashboard, we'll be able to find both projects and see the different things that are going on with both projects. Okay, so let's go over now and show you what this Someleze, please help to
Yeah,
all what you do
your
is
screen is
just the
on.
same. Can you see my Visual Studio ID?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Great. So add a new project, and we're going to this time add, go over to Aspire, add app host, which is our orchestration. And we're going to rename this app host. And then don't forget to click on configure for HTTPS. We're sticking with our 8.0 long-term support. Clicking on create. And if you notice command line, you can definitely utilize all of the resources that are there. Don't forget the way we referenced our different projects to do the same. Remember, I mentioned two ways you can do it. Either we drag and pull here or come over to that add. Just to confirm, let's ensure that so both projects have successfully, as you can see from here, both projects. So now to projects.cs of the app host project. And remember, we said that we can have
You muted yourself, Japhlet. So that's why we can't hear you. You're still on mute. I can't hear you, but you should be good to go. You're still on mute again. You're mute.
You hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
So sorry, let's just go back here. Let me know just in case you lose my voice at any point in time. So if you can still see my Visual Studio screen,
Yeah.
is it up yet?
Yes, it's up.
Cool. So we're adding the API. Remember, we have two projects, first API and then My Weather Hub, and we're going to be referencing both projects or utilizing both projects so that they can run together. So first is we're going to call out the builder, and what we're going to say is add the project to this, right? And the name of our project is My API. This is what I'm looking for. Project, the API, which is this specific project that we had earlier created. And then we're going to give it a name, which is going to show in our, so let's just have this as API. And we're going to do the same for this builder, add project, and we're going to do project dot my weather hub. Open up and see my weather hub. Great. So let's ensure everything is working properly. This time, I think so. If you're using Visual Studio to add an additional code, so you would need to check out the resource to actually be able to find that code that you would. So let's save this. And what we are going to do is our post. And it's going to
Japhlet, if you are saying something, we no longer hear you. Okay, awesome. So whilst we're still waiting for Japhlet to come back, if you have any questions around .NET Aspire orchestration and you have any questions, you can be able to just put them in the chat, and then we can be able to answer them with Japhlet and also Bruno, because Bruno is also on the screen on the stream as well. So the next part is actually looking at the Visual Studio tooling for .NET Aspire. So while you can manually add in the smart service defaults and configure orchestration with the app host, if you're using Visual Studio 2022, there's a great tooling support that will do it for you automatically. So you can see on the screen, and I think even Japhlet, as he was doing some of his demos, he was able to showcase part of it. But before we actually look at this Visual Studio tooling for .NET Aspire, let's look at some of the other features within .NET Aspire, which is service discovery, in which once Japhlet is back, he might actually give us a demo. But with orchestration, right, as we spoke earlier on, the .NET Aspire app host knows what to start up, right? But we can also configure it so it knows about project dependencies, and it can enable applications to automatically discover each other, so we don't have to use hard-coded strings. And I know this as I relate to it, because when I was still a university student, I really, really loved hard coding values onto my code. So with .NET Aspire, we can be able to, shift away from hard coding strings within our application, and then we can be able to use and enable applications to automatically discover each other, so that we don't have to hard code those strings using service discovery. And what I mean by that is that traditionally we would use connection strings, which is a pretty standard practice inside of our development, to define an endpoint, in this case with a specific address. And then when we deploy our application, we would update this endpoint with the actual production endpoint. So if you have like an endpoint, for an example, a local connection string, so for a local database, for an example, and you have a local SQL database, you'd have like a local host or a local host connection string that you're going to have for your application. And then once you done doing your development and you want to move your application onto production, then that's where we update the specific connection string to either to point into the endpoint that we have for example, an Azure SQL database or an Azure Cosmos DB database. And then in our application, we would use our configuration to grab the specific endpoint out. And as a developer, though, we have to configure our application with configure our application with to configure our back end, and of course we need to make sure that we are always adding and updating this connection string as we develop our application. So we have to make sure that our connection string is always up to date, and whenever we are doing this development, and we have to be very much mindful of, are we developing and we're doing updates, and are we ready to move it onto production? Do we have to update that connection string, or do we still keep it to our local host? So it sure would be nice if we could automatically have our applications discover each other if they depend on each other. And again, with .NET Aspire, you are able to be able to manage your microservices for application properly. So where does service discovery come into play? And I think Japhlet can be able to come into this and be able to share some light to it.
Yeah, sure. Confirm you're able to hear me.
Yep, can hear you.
Still sounding clear?
Yeah.
Cool. So let's go over to our developer dashboards, and now it's back up. So you should be able to see my screen just before we head over to that section. I'm sure it's visible now, right?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, great. So let's run this. Currency all the things that are currently going on. So you can see that this has been created. You notice that when Bruno explained earlier, he mentioned, and if you notice, we have both our project API and our project hub. You notice the different services, the links to the endpoints that is connected to localhost and then 7032, and then you have the API that we are connected to. Now, when you come over to your traces, you will be able to find every single thing going on in the application, as whatever clicks, whatever is going on your website, you'll be able to find them there. And then for your console logs, whatever you do, you would also be able to see it. So let's say, for example, for my resources, I come over to this site that has been locally hosted, and it's going to take us directly to the weather reports page. When we try doing anything, we're going to find some new results that are going to be imputed here under our console log. So let's see if this is going to, let's try reloading this. Great. So this took some time to come up. So notice that first, if you notice, it's currently at 44 lines. We didn't take note of what our earlier log, the last log was, but now it's currently at 44 lines, and this is the last thing that happened. So I'm going to go over to the website and click on something, and you're going to see that we're going to find some new logs that have been added. So you see now it's at 52 from 44 last. It's now started processing using the HTTP request and then getting from the API we're connected to the forecast for this specific region. We clicked Cape Fairweather to the Snanka Straits, which is states AK. Fortunately, I really don't know the meaning of this. Okay, AK, as you can see from here, AK stands for Alaska, probably. So it's saying what it's from AKZ 322, mostly, and then it has given us the final result here at 52. So we can see every single thing that's going on within our application, within whatever we have built, right? And then when we go over to metrics and traces, we should also be able to see all the different things that have happened. We're not able to go a little bit in depth into this just because of our demo gods not being in our favor today, and we're technically almost out of time. So Someleze, head over to service discovery. And
Yeah, for sure.
okay, sorry.
Yeah, so for service discovery, I mean, that was a great demo from Japhlet and just taking us through the developer dashboard. So, like I asked earlier on with service discovery, when we dive a little bit deep with it, is that what we can do is that instead of just adding each of our projects to the builder of our distributed application, we can actually have the projects reference each other. So instead of making all of that bulk addition onto our startup file for our projects, we can be able to make sure that our projects actually reference each other. So in this case, when I add a project, it is returning a resource that I can then add as a reference, as you see on the screen, to other projects. So here, our web front end is using our our API service. And I want to make a special call out here, which is that the API service and the web front end have these strings defined, and these are specific keys that we can be able to use later as part of the service discovery. If we take a look below, we have our service that we are adding our HTTP or an HTTP client on, and in this case, we're setting our base address to both HTTPS plus HTTP. So as a developer, you're supposed to know the difference between HTTPS and HTTP. One is secure and one is not. And we're using that API service string that .NET Aspire Service Discovery will automatically resolve for us when we run our application. So we have to make sure that we bring in references to each of our projects instead of bulk adding them onto this specific startup file, right? But there are still connection string. This doesn't necessarily mean, as much as we do a lot of that work with service discovery, this doesn't mean that we're getting rid of the connection strings that we need for our application. In fact, a connection string is generated for us by the .NET Aspire app host, and it is automatically set up when we run our application. This means that if we have our connection strings configured, we can still set them on our back end when we have them deployed. So even with Japhlet's application, you can be able to still have your connection string in the backend instead of removing them entirely. Service discovery doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get rid of your connection strings for your application. We're gonna go over the demo a bit later, so that we can be able to, cover some of the other features within .NET Aspire, in which I'll probably, if you have any questions, you have to make sure that you put them onto the comment section and onto the chat, and we will be able to answer them a bit later on. But now, let's move on to the other part of .NET Aspire, that other feature, the second last feature of .NET Aspire. Japhlet, would you like to shed some light onto that?
Yeah. So the next is components. Now, a lot of times while building your entire solution, you need to add different parts together. So, for example, you probably have libraries that you need to integrate into your application. .NET Aspire components actually gives you the opportunity to do this. You can add whatever component you need to, as you can see in the next slide. It could be a NuGet, something like that. You can easily add that to your .NET application utilizing .NET Aspire. Now, this is the next slide is how it works. So how this is different from you just adding the library directly is that first you are able to add the components to the app host, and then when you do so using a single line of code, it's actually possible, as you can see, I think highlighting the next section, you can see we currently added that. Great, thank you very much. So we'll be able to add that. And here, for example, we can see that we're able to add a PostGIS database. But not only are we able to add this, but also we're adding a PostGIS admin as well, a PostGIS admin as well, yes, as you can see. And on top of that, we can also notice that for the third line that's highlighted in the box, we're adding Redis cache into it and configuring everything both from our backend, as you can see in the next couple of lines, and also our front end, ensuring that these things are automatically are referenced and they are automatically used while going through .NET Aspire application. So when we run our application, our .NET Aspire application, .NET Aspire will automatically pull down these container images or any other dependencies that are required, and then it's going to automatically start them utilizing. Remember, we mentioned back then, um, we could either use Docker or use Podman. So it's going to be activated inside of Docker or Podman. You don't have to do this manually yourself. It saves you a lot of time actually coming up with your machine, actually doing all the things you need to do. You can get it done. It gets it done automatically for you. Now, as we're going to see next, on top of that, there's another package that you can integrate directly into your applications. So let's say if you want to add caching, for example, into your backend or maybe your front end, you may need to add in the output caching component, as you can see from the section that's highlighted in our Blazor application. Now, notice what we've done here. For the sections that are highlighted, what we've done is we've added a single line of code, and that line of code basically says, please add your Redis output cache with the same key that has been configured earlier, and enable that to be able to go through service discovery. Now, these components not to just add Redis connectivity to your application, but they would also be able to add smart defaults. As you can see from the first line, it's adding your smart or your service defaults and enabling things like adding retries, health checks, logging, and additional telemetry that can be collected and visualized when you're utilizing your developer dashboard. Now the next,
Yeah, demos for later. We'll see demos a bit later. And obviously, if you have any questions, like I mentioned earlier on, be sure to put them in the comment section. We'll get to them almost right after the demo that we're going to show. The last one, again, Japhlet spoke about Redis, so we can be able to go ahead and add Redis cache directly into this application through that specific demo that you're going to see a bit later on. The last feature for .NET Aspire is deployment. So, all right, finally is that you can be able to use deployment or the deployment phase of the application, because .NET Aspire, as I've shown, or as we've shown with Japhlet and Bruno, so far gives us a world-class development experience and really helps us locally on our machine get deep insights into our application. But at some time, we need to be able to deploy it. And how do we be able to do this? Are we able to do this through flexible integrations and deployment? So what are our options, Japhlet?
so the first thing is deploy application directly, like all that we have been doing. You probably, as you've stated earlier, you probably need to add in those dependencies to your developer pipeline. But not where you're developing your .NET application and whatever services you're actually utilizing, whatever platforms your different cloud services to your developers CLI, it's actually possible to integrate all of these and continue deploying your application into app service. Let's say use Azure Redis Cache as an example. We can do this by ensuring that we're deploying these specific sections, utilizing it to actually deploy our solution and ensuring that we have the best quality from it. The demo for this, unfortunately, still not working. Would just leave that over for you to head over to the GitHub repository. You'll be able to find, again, access to all of this and go through all of this.
Yeah, awesome. So again, this is just a video around how Visual Studio would look like. In this case, we're not going to show this video. We're going to have the demo that's going to be up and running in just a few short minutes so that you can be able to see how everything actually comes together with all of the features with .NET Aspire. So, right, so these are the 4 major features of .NET Aspire that we've now integrated directly into this application. And if you've been following along with the workshop that you cloned the GitHub repository from, you'll be able to understand how to apply this, and from the demo that we're just going to show in a short minute. But there's a lot more to .NET Aspire, including deep integration into tooling templates and a lot more as you start to build out your applications. So what do I mean by that? With .NET Aspire is that what's great there is that it makes it super easy to get started. With those templates that come with the SDK workload, we've seen it easily integrate into our local development experience, and it gives us deep insights. And we also saw how easy it is to deploy our application and orchestrate it with C# topology. So some of the best benefits with .NET Aspire is easily getting started, being able to easily build your application through using some of the features within the .NET Aspire, service discovery, developer dashboard to gain some insights to our application, and also it being easy to deploy our application with a single command run. And obviously our application topology is on top of C# and also cloud development. Enough talk, just a quick demo from Bruno that we're going to get right now with your .NET Aspire solution that brings everything together. So I'm just going to bring Bruno to the stage and also have that specific demo to bring everything together.
Perfect. Yes. So, hey, Aspire is a lot of things, but when we finish the previous demo, one thing that I really like is that the dashboard example, because what we've seen in these console logs here and there was kind of a mess. The console give us the dashboard give us the chance to have everything centralized there in terms of metrics, traces, and more. In order to do that, we've seen that we need to add this app host that is going to be kind of the main entry point to do everything in Aspire. Is going to help us to orchestrate our projects, to also define dependencies. And this is important. We have the backend, the API, and the front end. So we can add a very nice piece of code. A very nice piece of code like this one, where we are going to build a builder. Sorry about that. And then we are going to start to add components. We can add cache. And we are going to use a specific cache. I am going to get later to this. But I am going to add a project. And this is a very cool thing that we can do here. We literally say, hey, builder, add this project. Because we have project reference here, this is a super natural way to add components here. And I add the API. And then when I add the weather project, the front end, I will say, hey, this project has a reference to the API. And it's using an external HTTP endpoint. We talk about service discovery. This is going to really help our projects to basically find from the web the API. But also, because we are talking about components here, we define that, hey, we want to apply a cache. And the cache is an external component and is going to be also implemented on the API. So what I like about these 10, 12, 13 lines of code is that we are using C# in a very natural way to declare kind of infrastructure as a code, to declare how is our application organized. So we have a front end, the back end, these are the relationship. Also the back ends have some cache. And we talk about components here. And the components, if we go to, in example, NuGet, and we start to search for Aspire hosting, we are going to see that we have so many components that we can use. Right now, the one that I am using, let me go to installed one. I am using Aspire hosting Redis, which is not A Microsoft one, I think it's not from us. Oh, yes, it's from Microsoft. Sorry about that. But it's going to help us to have the cache implemented in Aspire. So when we put this all together and we press S5 here, what is going to happen? First of all, I need Docker because the Redis is going to be launched and implemented in Docker. But we are going to have that we press S5. Docker is not running anything here. I have an empty list of containers. So I'm going to have a single console application. And I see here that I have 2 containers to run the cache. I also have here in the other monitor, let me bring this one here. I also have here the dashboard. And the dashboard is going to have different components here. We are going to have the API. Let's zoom this a little. The API, the weather, and the cache. Of course, I can go here and open the application. And remember, every 5 clicks, we trigger an exception. Don't do that in production code. So let's click here, 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 here. And let's take a look here what's happened here. So if I go here to the structures, I am going to start to see a lot of logs here of what's happened. But I can also start to see the traces here. And hey, fun fact here, we start to have some errors here. I can go to the details and I can see that, hey, you know what? The front end called the API called the cache, and then we have the response there because we have some information here stored in the cache. If I go and click on, I don't think, let me go to the next page and click on this one. In example, it takes some time. You take a look at, let's do this one. Take a look how it takes a couple of seconds to look at this. And the next time I click here, it's automatic. If we go back to the traces and go to the bottom of the traces, we can see here that, hey, the original one is almost half the second when the request came from the cache. It's super fast. So we have everything here. The cache has everything. And literally in the code part, the big piece of code that we add is we add the app host as kind of a orchestrators and more to our application. We define here the application and we define Redis cache here. If you want to add Azure OpenAI services, you can add it here. If you want to add any component that you want to do it, it should be here. And this is the place that is going to organize everything and literally no changes in your code in order to get this. Maybe one here, in example, when you talk about the weather point from the front end versus the back end, this is how we are going to define the weather, the endpoints. We're going to say, hey, HTTP or HTTPS, go for the API. And the API is literally the name that we have here for the API component. And the final part, the deployment part, this is the amazing one. We can right-click and publish. Don't do this at home. Don't right-click and publish. We have a lot of services to publish components here. But when we do this, and I said, let me create a new environment in example, I am going to select my target, which is going to be container apps in Azure for .NET, a subscription, a location, an environment name. Let's learn line Aspire 07. When I do this, it's going to create, I have already probably an 07 there. Sorry about that. So many tests. We're going to have an environment that is going to be created. And then when we have this, we can publish to the cloud. And what we are going to have published here, we are going to have something like this. This is a resource group in Azure. And take a look what we have here. We have a container app for the backend, for the API, a container app from the front end, from the cache. Oh, I'm missing the front end. I think I canceled before it finished, so we can do the demo. I have a container registry to manage the container apps. I have also an environment. I have a managed identity to put all of the keys. Everything will be automatically put here. And yes, if I go here and press publish again, it's going to start again the process, and it's going to take some minutes to get there. But we can also pick up this deployment script, which is a bicep script, add it into our actions, or add it into our CI/CD process, and we can automate even the deployment of everything here. So the whole idea of Aspire, as Someleze and Japhlet said, is to help us here to do this, not boring, but sometimes challenging tasks like adding resiliency, adding traceability, make our application really, really powerful here. So, hey, super fast. So sorry about that, but I hope that covers the ABC of this.
Thanks,
Great.
Bruno.
Thank you very
Great.
much,
That was a
Bruno.
wonderful demo. Yeah. So, one last thing that I want to talk about is like really quick before we wrap up, because it's time for us to go, is that we mentioned that you can integrate other types of applications into systems. There's two specific ways of doing this one. It's just using open telemetry in your existing application. For an example, let's say a JavaScript application, and using the standalone Aspire dashboard. But additionally, you can integrate in Node applications into the app host to automatically run your Node front end with your .NET back end. Again, .NET Aspire is for everyone. And when you do that, you will not only see in the .NET Aspire dashboard your .NET API, for an example, in this case, running, but it will also show you all of the other resources running, which happened to be, in this case, Node applications. For an example, if you have like a Node application or a JavaScript application. So to wrap this up, what are the features within .NET Aspires? So again, you have smart defaults, developer dashboard, orchestration, service discovery, components, deployment, in which Japhlet and Bruno made sure to showcase and show us how those actually work. And hopefully you were able to follow along with the stuff that we were doing. And you have the link to the GitHub repository so that you can be able to clone the repo and do the workshop yourself and try out .NET Aspire to aspirify your applications in the near future, so that you can be able to learn how to easily build and easily deploy your applications as well. And with that, make sure that you go to these resources that are on the screen so that you can be able to get started with .NET Aspire today and engage with the team on GitHub, so you can be able to share a few of your insights and your feedback around .NET Aspire, what you've tried, what's working, what's not working, and then be able to use .NET Aspire by going to aka.ms/.NET Aspire. From me, I want to say thank you so much for joining this live stream, and I hope you are having a beautiful day, evening, or morning. Japhlet, any last words?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much, Someleze, and we're so sorry the demo gods weren't in our favor, but thanks to Bruno for stepping in and ensuring that we didn't miss any of the amazing .NET Aspire stuffs that we have seen. We want you all to continue learning about this. Don't forget to reach out to us, and we'll be definitely there to help you out at any point in time whenever you have issues. And don't forget, whenever you come across bugs or issues, don't worry, it's going to be fine. You can reach out to us, ask us your questions, and we'll be sure to respond to them. If you also need to engage with the team on GitHub, the other link on the screen, which is also going to be in the chat, is your go-to place to that. We're going to see you all in the next session of Let's Learn.net on another amazing topic. Until then, don't forget to stay amazing, and don't forget to build cool .NET Aspire applications.